The blip on our long-range sensors was almost dismissed as cosmic dust, just another faint, transient anomaly in the vast and different tapestry of the K113 cluster. It registered as a single, primitive vessel, barely more than a scrap of metal, belonging to that utterly unremarkable backwater species known as Terrans. We, the glorious, advanced, and undeniably superior Cathar Imperium, chuckled, a collective, condescending rumble that echoed through the bridge of the verdant pike, a vessel that had seen more cosmic wonders and conquered more systems than these Terrans had likely even charted. We laughed. Oh, how we laughed. It was the last time any of us would find anything about them even remotely amusing. In fact, it was the last time we'd ever truly understand amusement in the same way again. The scout ship Verdant Pike, a sleek, emerald-hued spearhead of Imperial exploration, dipped out of warp at the very edge of the K113 cluster. Standard sweep protocol, check for nascent anomalies, rogue stellar phenomena, or occasionally some lost, pathetic species needing a gentle nudge towards Imperial enlightenment or annexation, depending on their mineral wealth. Commander Vale, his 6 multi-jointed talons clicking softly against the polished hololith, surveyed the sector. His crest, a proud fan of iridescent feathers, was perfectly erect, reflecting the calm efficiency of his command. "Anything noteworthy, Hawk?" he rumbled, his voice a low, resonant thrum. Sub-Scanner Hawk, a younger, more excitable officer with perpetually twitching antennae, adjusted a nerve cluster interface on his console. "Negative, Commander. Just the usual wait. One contact." His antennae stiffened, then drooped slightly. "Metallic. No warp wake detected. No fusion bloom. Primitive, Commander. Barely a blip. Probably a derelict." He sounded almost apologetic for wasting Vale's time. Vale's crimson pupils narrowed into slits. "Primitive, you say?" He tapped a talon against the hololith, zooming in on the infinitesimal speck. "What are the mass readings?" Hawk hissed, a sound of mild exasperation. "Mass readings 8 million tons, Commander. Length 2 kilometers. Power signature? Negative." The bridge went silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the Verdant Pike's auxiliary systems. Negative power. Vale's crest, which had been so confidently erect, stiffened further, a subtle tremor running through its base. Negative power did not propel 2-kilometer hulls, not even a primitive, derelict one. In their physics, in any physics, a mass that size required an astronomical amount of energy just to maintain inertia, let alone move. Yet the sensor readings were unequivocal. The computer recalibrated, running a dozen diagnostics, cross-referencing with known primitive propulsion methods. Still negative. Every system, every protocol screamed that this vessel should not exist. Yet the ship was there, undeniably present, a 2-kilometer phantom, coasting at .2 lights. It moved with an eerie, effortless grace, a silent leviathan against the backdrop of distant nebulae. Its hull was blacker than the void behind it, absorbing all light, reflecting nothing. It was like staring at a perfect absence, a hole punched clean through the fabric of space. Science Officer Rick, a meticulous, multi-limbed scholar whose usual expression was one of serene intellectual curiosity, was now hunched over his spectrometer, his bioluminescent eyes wide with disbelief. "No heat dump," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No infrared emissions whatsoever. Commander, it's colder than the cosmic microwave background." That was impossible. Thermodynamics was the first law every cadet learned, the bedrock of all their engineering. Everything generated heat. Every star, every planet, every living creature, every active system, even a passive hull absorbing ambient radiation should register some thermal signature. To be colder than the residual heat of the universe itself? It was an affront to reason. It was an insult to the very concept of physical reality. Vale's crest, now fully rigid, bristled with a growing disquiet. This wasn't primitive. This wasn't even advanced. This was something else entirely. Hail them, he ordered, his voice sharper than before. Standard first contact protocols. Full spectrum, all frequencies. The verdant pike's comms array pulsed, sending out a cascade of greetings in every known galactic language, every diplomatic frequency, every mathematical sequence designed for universal comprehension. No answer. Again, he barked, a flicker of genuine alarm in his eyes. Boost the signal. Target their mid-hull. Silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, it felt like a blade severing their connection to everything they understood. The Terran vessel, if it truly was Terran, a designation that was beginning to feel profoundly inadequate, did not even ping back their sweep. It offered no acknowledgement, no passive return. It simply existed, a colossal 2-kilometer void, a gaping hole in the logic of physics, patiently waiting. Hulk, his antennae now a frantic blur, rerouted auxiliary sensors, diverting precious processing power from navigation and life support to the enigmatic contact. Every return, every recalibration, every desperate attempt to make sense of the data screamed the same impossible truth. The ship was powered down, completely inert, yet its inertial dampers were demonstrably active. The sensor readouts depicted gravity lenses, precisely calibrated and impossibly powerful, holding the Terran vessel's spine straight against the colossal momentum that should have, by all rights, snapped it like a dry twig. It's like a dead star holding itself together with an active gravitational field, but generating no energy, Hulk stammered, his voice laced with genuine terror. The stress on the hull should be immense. It should be tearing itself apart. But it's not. Rick, his bioluminescent eyes fixed on the impossible energy readings, or rather the lack thereof, finally managed to articulate the unthinkable. They're drawing zero-point energy straight out of the vacuum, Commander, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the strained hum of the verdant pike's overloaded systems. Our best labs, the planet-sized colliders at the heart of the Imperium, they need to expend vast, unimaginable amounts of energy just to sip that froth, to even detect a minuscule fluctuation. These Terrans, they're doing it passively, as a default state. Vale snarled, a low guttural sound of pure frustration and dawning horror. This wasn't just a technological leap, it was a fundamental rewriting of reality. He ordered a deep scan, his voice tight with suppressed panic. I want every watt, every boson, every quark. I want to know how this thing works. I want its schematics, its energy signature, its very atomic composition. The verdant pike's primary sensor array spun up, a shimmering disk of concentrated energy that drank power from the ship's core. Energy expenditure spiked aboard verdant pike, the very deck plates vibrating with the strain, and then, with an abrupt, chilling finality, the readings flatlined. Not because the Terran ship had changed its state, not because it had moved or activated a countermeasure, but because their own sensors, the most advanced in the Imperium, simply refused to output numbers. The data strings collapsed into null symbols, streams of meaningless characters, as if mathematics itself had surrendered its grasp on reality in the face of this anomaly. It was as if the universe had decided, for that specific 2-kilometer stretch of space, that numbers simply didn't apply. A junior technician, a young, eager recruit who had just completed his advanced physics certification, let out a strangled cry and fainted, slumping from his console. His colleagues barely noticed, their own eyes glued to the main screen where the Terran hull flickered just once, like a mirage resetting itself. And then, where the perfectly smooth, light-absorbing armor plating had been, letters appeared. Human alphabet, burned into the coating with an eerie internal luminescence, as if the metal itself had decided to speak. UNKNOWABLE. The word hung there, a silent, defiant challenge for a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity. Then, as effortlessly as they had appeared, the letters sank back into the skin of the ship, the surface sealing without scar, leaving no trace. The vessel was once again a perfect, featureless void, its message delivered, its defiance absolute. Vale felt a cold dread seep into his very bones. This wasn't a ship, it was a statement. Fleet doctrine was clear, immutable, etched into the very core of imperial military philosophy. If a first contact target refused parley, if it proved uncooperative or unresponsive, then one applied gentle coercion. It was a measured diplomatic escalation designed to demonstrate imperial technological superiority without resorting to immediate destructive force. Vale, his mind reeling from the impossible readings, clung to the familiarity of protocol like a drowning man to a spar. "Prepare a Grade 1 tractor lance," he commanded, his voice hoarse. "Target their midsection, a gentle nudge. Let's see if that gets their attention." The tractor lance, a core component of imperial utility in defensive systems, was a marvel of focused energy. It could tow disabled frigates, reroute rogue asteroids, even gently maneuver a small moon. Its emerald lattice, a shimmering cage of coherent light, wrapped around the Terran hull, designed to apply a precise, irresistible force. It was a tool of subtle power, not brute strength. But as the lattice engaged, a feedback scream ripped through the verdant pike's emitters. It wasn't just an overload, it was a cry of agony from the ship's systems. The emerald lattice, instead of gripping the Terran vessel, recoiled violently. It twisted, contorted, folding in on itself like a Mobius strip of coherent light, spiraling into an impossible knot before imploding with a silent, blinding flash. The verdant pike yawed violently, thrown off course as if struck by an invisible hammer. Gravity gyros howled, straining against forces that shouldn't exist, their internal mechanisms grinding with a sound akin to tortured metal. Every screen on the bridge flashed the same chilling glyph, an ancient symbol of infinite recursion, infinite magnitude, infinity. Infinite load, infinite recursion. The Terran vessel had not merely resisted, it had swallowed the energy of the tractor beam, processed it, and returned it in a form that broke the very laws of their physics. The helmsman, a seasoned veteran who had navigated through black holes and nebulae without a tremor, let out a guttural scream. He tore off his console, his multifaceted eyes wide with uncomprehending terror, blood frothing from his nostrils as his neural interface fried. Vale, his own talons trembling, slammed the retrodesk switch, fighting against the ship's violent lurch. "Helms, vent plasma, get us stable. What in the void just happened?" Rick, who had instinctively reached out to the tractor console before the feedback hit, stared at the burn on his palm. It wasn't a conventional burn. It was aged, wrinkled like a century had passed in a picosecond. He looked up, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization. "Sir, the beam, it aged. Our own beam got older, decayed inside a picosecond. Entropy reversed only for it. We just witnessed time inversion on demand." Silence again. But this time, it was a silence born of profound existential dread. Localized entropic reversal. No known civilization, not even the mythical precursors, had ever mastered such a feat. It was considered theoretically possible, perhaps, in the abstract, but practically impossible to achieve, let alone control. To reverse the arrow of time for a specific energy signature in a localized field? It defied every principle of universal decay, every law of causality. And the Terrans, supposedly newcomers, a species barely out of their cradle, had done it as a passive defense. They hadn't even tried. The universe itself was bending to their will. Fleet doctrine also said, escalate. There were always more options, more layers of overwhelming force to apply. The Imperium did not retreat from a challenge, especially not from an unknown. Vale, his pride wounded, his understanding of reality shattered, but his resolve hardened by millennia of imperial might, made the only decision he felt he could. He armed a dispersion torpedo, a weapon of last resort, designed to shatter planetary bodies or crack moons. Its yield was enough to destabilize a small star system, a terrifying display of destructive power. "Target their midline," he commanded, his voice strained but firm. "Fire." The torpedo leapt from the verdant pike's launch tube, a violet spear of concentrated annihilation, accelerating through the void with terrifying speed. It was a beautiful, terrible thing, a testament to Imperial engineering. It streaked towards the Terran hull, a promise of devastation. But halfway to its target, it simply stopped. Not stalled, not intercepted, not even deflected. It simply forgot its own velocity. Momentum drained from it like water from a breached dam, not dissipating, but ceasing to exist. The violet light flickered, then dimmed, as if the weapon itself had become confused, its purpose erased. Then, with an unnerving, almost casual precision, the warhead rotated 90 degrees. It turned back and accelerated, not towards the verdant pike's previous position, but directly towards its current location at twice its original speed. The very air on the bridge seemed to freeze. Defense turrets designed to intercept anything from stellar debris to hyperspace projectiles auto-triggered, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming threat. They fired, a frantic burst of defensive energy. But the torpedo, now a blur of violet light, didn't collide. It phased. It became translucent, a ghost of a weapon, passing through the frigate's hull without a sound, without a tremor, as if the very atoms of the verdant pike simply weren't there. It detonated inside the bridge bulkhead, a concussive blast that rattled every bone in Vale's body, ripped through the internal systems, and sent shrapnel tearing through the air. And then, impossibly, it detonated again, backwards, reassembling itself into a pristine casing before blinking out of existence entirely. It wasn't just a detonation, it was an undoing, a reversal, a demonstration of control over matter and energy that bordered on the divine. A message followed, not on their comms, but appearing directly on their main view screen, text only. Calm, in their own Imperial Galactic script, chillingly human. "Your weapon has been returned to you. We have chosen not to return it armed. Next time, we may forget to be polite." The words hung there, burning into their minds, a polite threat from a species that had just demonstrated absolute, terrifying power. They hadn't just disarmed a weapon, they had undone its very purpose, reversed its trajectory, and used it to deliver a message. A message that promised a far less forgiving response if they dared to try again. Silence. Not the mechanical silence of a ship powered down, but a profound, almost spiritual stillness. Even the coolant pumps, usually a constant, reassuring hum, seemed to cease their rhythmic thrumming, as though the Terran ship had loaned them a moment of absolute, terrifying stillness to contemplate existence, to truly grasp the abyss of their own insignificance. Vale felt the inexplicable weight of something vast, something ancient, looking through the hull at him, through the very equations that held his atoms together. It was a gaze that stripped away pretense, ambition, and even the comforting illusion of free will. His training screamed at him to retreat, to run, to issue a full-spectrum, tactical disengagement. But millennia of imperial doctrine, of never yielding, of always escalating, had been hammered into his very being. He opened the fleet channel, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his talons. "All hands, prepare for full-spectrum assault. Bring the Star Splitter online immediately." The Star Splitter, the ultimate deterrent, a device designed not just to destroy, but to unbind nuclear forces across 1,000 kilometers, to unravel the very fabric of space-time in a localized field. Its activation was a declaration of total war, a commitment to planetary sterilization if necessary. Power conduits across the verdant pike glowed white-hot, humming with the immense energy being channeled. The ship braced itself, a desperate, defiant last stand. But the Terran ship answered first. Its bow, that perfect, featureless blackness, peeled open, not in segments, not with hinges or mechanical parts, but like petals of space-time unfolding. It was an organic, impossible motion, a blossoming of nothingness. Inside was not a hangar bay, not a weapon, not even a light source. Inside was nothing. A black so absolute, so profound, that it showed them their own deaths, their lineage's extinction. The heat death of the universe played backwards into rebirth. It wasn't a void, it was the ultimate truth of non-existence reflected back at them. And then the black looked back. It wasn't a visual phenomenon in the traditional sense. It was a direct interface with their minds, a shared yet intensely personal experience. Every crew member on the bridge, from the shell-shocked helmsman to the stoic Vale, saw something different, yet equally devastating. A childhood pet, long lost and mourned, appeared, vivid and heartbreakingly real. A lost mate, a lover, a child, stood before them, their faces etched with accusation or sorrow. For some, it was a crime buried decades ago, a forgotten act of cruelty or cowardice, now replayed with excruciating clarity. The visions were not hallucinations. They were memories extracted and displayed, shared without consent, without filter, laid bare for all to see, for all to judge. Rick fell to his knees, his multi-limbed body shaking uncontrollably. He gasped, his voice choked with despair and awe. They weaponized ontology. They're fighting with meaning, with essence. They're twisting our very perception of reality. The Star Splitter's core, still charging, still drawing power that could obliterate worlds, imploded, not with a bang, but with a silent, terrifying implosion into a sphere 1 plank wide. It consumed the entire engineering deck, the hundreds of crew members, the colossal machinery, but it took with it precisely zero mass. There was no explosion, no flash, no outward force, just absence. A perfect, clean removal from existence. The verdant pike listed violently, engines offline, drifting aimlessly, a crippled husk of its former glory. The ultimate weapon, designed to destroy reality, had been effortlessly unmade. Amidst the utter devastation, the psychological collapse, and the eerie silence, a single comm light pulsed green on Vale's ruined console. It was the only functional system left, a direct, unencrypted channel. He stared at it for a long moment, his talons still, his crest drooping in utter defeat. What else could they possibly do? What other horrors could this thing inflict? With a profound sense of resignation, he accepted the connection. No face appeared, no holographic avatar, no visual representation whatsoever. Only a voice, calm, male, mid-30s perhaps, judging by the timbre. It spoke perfect Imperial Galactic, without a hint of an accent, without translator lag, as if it had been born speaking their tongue. It was a voice that conveyed absolute, unshakable confidence, devoid of malice, yet utterly terrifying in its casual power. "This is Terran Warship Unknowable," the voice stated, each syllable resonating deep within Vale's shattered mind. "You have been logged. Your vessel's capabilities, your species' current technological and philosophical understanding, your fleet protocols, and your individual psychological profiles have been thoroughly assessed. We suggest you update your understanding of the universal constants. We have." Vale swallowed, a dry, painful gulp. His voice, when it came, was barely a croak. What do you want?" A pause. Not a delay in transmission, but a deliberate, almost courteous silence, as if the entity on the other end was carefully considering its response, weighing its words. "We want you to carry a message." The voice was still calm, still unhurried. "Tell your empire the frontier is closed, permanently. Tell them the vacuum is no longer empty. It is now occupied. and tell them we remember every world that denied us a seat at the galactic table when we were young, every insult, every dismissal, every act of aggression, no matter how small, we remember. The channel closed. Not cut, not jammed, not even a sudden disconnection. It simply ceased existing between one syllable and the next, as if the very concept of the connection had been gently, politely folded out of reality. The green calm light winked out. The silence returned, heavier, more profound than before. Emergency beacons, fractured and distorted, sang their desperate, broken song into the void. The verdant pike, a ghost of its former self, slowly, painfully limped onto warp vectors, its engines coughing dark matter, struggling to generate even a fraction of the power needed for a stable jump. Behind them, the Terran ship, the unknowable, sealed its blossom of night, the spatial petals folding back into that perfect, featureless blackness. It resumed its harmless, enigmatic drift, a silent sentinel in the K113 cluster. No pursuit, no need. The psychological damage, the utter shattering of their reality was more complete than any physical destruction. Vale stared at his cracked reflection in a dead monitor. The crimson glow of his eyes dulled, his crest limped defeated. For millennia, the Cathar Empyrean had crossed half the galaxy enforcing order, bringing the light of their civilization to lesser species, shaping the cosmos to their will. Today, they had met the law that rewrote physics on a whim. They had met a power that didn't just break the rules, it edited them. With trembling talons, he opened the ship's log, the last vestiges of his authority clinging to him. Scout Ship Verdant Pike, mission designation 77K. First contact event with Terran vessel. Outcome, catastrophic paradigm shift. Recommend immediate withdrawal of all frontier assets. Recommend reclassification of humans from type 1, primitive and exploitable, to type Omega-, existential threat, category unknown, avoid all contact. Recommend prayer. He closed the log, the last word echoing in the devastated silence of the bridge. Somewhere in the ruined hull, amidst the twisted metal and the smell of ozone, a child's laughter echoed. Impossible. A memory extracted by the unknowable? A phantom sound from a shattered mind? Or something else entirely? He did not investigate. He simply stared at the void, and for the first time in his long, proud life, Vale, commander of the Verdant Pike, felt utterly, hopelessly insignificant. 3 warp jumps later, the Verdant Pike, a battered, broken testament to a failed mission, transmitted its burst message to the Imperial throne world. The message, stripped of all unnecessary data, condensed to its terrifying core, ended with this stark, chilling pronouncement. We came seeking new territory. Instead, we found a new god or a new devil, and we are no longer sure there is a difference. Across the vast, sprawling Cathar Imperium, the response was immediate and unprecedented. War fleets, poised on the frontiers, recalled to core systems. Expansion ceased. Borders, which had once been relentlessly pushing outwards for centuries, shrank, pulling back from the newly defined edge of the unknown. Civilizations that had once mocked humanity, seeing them as a quaint, insignificant species, now built shrines to empty skies, offering appeasement to an unseen, incomprehensible power. The universe, which they'd believed to be thoroughly charted and understood, suddenly felt vast, terrifying, and utterly alien once more. And drifting still in the K113 cluster, a silent, black hole in the fabric of reality, the unknowable waited. Its engines cold, its hull patient, its purpose enigmatic. A monument, a warning, a reminder that somewhere among the stars, humanity had stopped asking permission and had started, quite literally, editing reality. If that gave you the same chill it gave me, hit like. Drop a comment telling me which part broke your brain, and subscribe for more stories where humanity reminds the galaxy why you never ever poke the Death Worlder.